Hi, I'm Jennifer Simmons with AIM, and I'm here with our CEO, Matt Greller. It's week 7 of the long session over at the Indiana General Assembly, and we have a few updates for you. Matt, jumping right in, there was one of the many annexation bills we've been talking about, Senate Bill 556 by Senator Buck. We had some good luck there this week.
Yeah, so far so good. We're not quite out of the woods yet. Senate Bill 556, which we've talked to you about a number of times, deals with annexation. Was voted on this week on the Senate floor, failed by lack of a constitutional majority. It received 20 votes, 19 noes, so it did not pass. You have to have 26 votes to pass a bill in the Senate by a constitutional majority. Did not receive that, but in a weird twist of fate, a Senate rule allows for any vote that receives at least 20, or any bill that receives at least 20 votes to automatically be placed back on the third reading calendar. Third reading deadline in the Senate is early next week, so we'll continue to watch it and see if it comes back for a vote. We do not think it will, and if it does, we feel like we're in a decent position still at this point. So good news there. Thanks to more than a handful of municipal officials that came into town on President's Day this past Monday, helped lobby that bill and some other issues, so very appreciative of their efforts to come in and help us out at the State House.
And if folks see their legislators over the weekend, we still want them to say, please, if that does come back up.
Yeah, particularly your senators, if that does come back up, vote no. And if they did vote no the first time around, thank them for that. Certainly appreciate their efforts there.
Another bill we worked on this week, House Bill 1625, sponsored by or authored by Representative Clear, has a really big impact on cities and towns, and that bill did proceed.
Yeah, so this is the bill that would require cities, towns, counties, and the state, in some instances even, to do a housing impact analysis on really any regulation, any ordinance that we pass that has an impact on the housing market. So we have to identify what that impact is and then share it. It requires some other things as well, posting of fees and things like that on the website. We understand the goal is to get at the issue of housing affordability, what we call market-based housing, things of that nature. We don't feel like this is the approach, though. We don't see where the benefit is to get more housing starts in Indiana, to provide more housing opportunities for folks around the state. This just adds more bureaucracy, more red tape to the process, more regulation for local governments, really making it more difficult and adding more time to the process. So we'll continue to work on the bill on the Senate side. I think we're all in agreement with the Realtors and the Builders Association and the State Chamber and the Manufacturers Association that more housing is a good thing. That means our state's growing in population, it's growing in number of jobs, but this is not the approach to go about making that a reality.
There are a couple of bills this week that we want to cover regarding TIF. The first one is House Bill 1596, which we've talked about before, but took a turn this week that makes that bill more concerning.
Yeah, 1596, like Jennifer said, we've talked to you about it a couple of times. It was really targeted at a program down in Jeffersonville that was a partnership with Ivy Tech to train folks in that part of the state for jobs in their particular area. We had some real concerns with the bill for that reason, but also that it encompassed and brought into play a lot of the partnerships that you all have with your local school corporations. Whether you are purchasing MacBooks for them, Chromebooks, whether you are providing dollars for infrastructure improvements through your TIF revenues, any sort of partnership you have with your local school corporation, that now is called into question, and you have to go through a whole litany of new processes and new determinations. It really, I think, goes the opposite direction of what we're hearing a lot of discussion about today, and how we can partner as cities and towns more effectively with schools, provide more revenue options for them. So that's a concern of the bill. And then the bill, as Jennifer said, took a real turn yesterday, as a matter of fact. A second reading amendment was introduced by with the author's approval, that opened up the entire TIF discussion as a whole. It's a much broader bill now with much greater impacts on TIF and how we determine whether money can be spent outside the TIF allocation area. Very unusual for such a substantive change to a bill to occur on second reading that had not gone through the committee process. So again, we'll be working on that in the second half as well. Stay tuned there, but big changes hopefully coming for the better on that bill.
The second bill would be Senate Bill 566 regarding housing TIF, something we haven't talked about much this session and new for Indiana, really.
Yeah, very new. It does exist in other parts of the country. It would be a new tool for cities and towns to utilize for housing. A housing TIF it works just the way any other TIF works, but this specifically designated for housing. Would urge some caution here. The economists tell us, the fiscal folks tell us that TIF may not be the best tool to use for housing, incentivizing housing, that it may not work because the increment is not large enough to make it an effective tool. We also want to be careful about expanding the uses of TIF in the climate we're in the legislature today. There are a lot of opponents to TIF, and opening that up to further uses can be problematic as well. That being said, there are certainly instances around the state where cities and towns can make effective use of a housing TIF, and we don't want to stand in the way of that, which is why we testified in support of the bill this week in the Senate. So it's on to the Senate floor early next week, and we'll see where it goes in the House.
All right, so next week represents the halfway mark between during the long legislative session. So look for plenty of updates from AIM and possibly some alerts in your inbox. Also, don't forget to register for the AIM Legislative Dinner. Space is limited and those seats are filling up. So try to register next week if you're planning to come on March 20th for the AIM Legislative Dinner. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.